was 22 years old when I had my first formal job performance review. And my boss was a guy named John Huffman. Now, John was a commander in the Navy before he was my boss, and in this big Navy commander voice, he said something to me I'll never forget. He said, "David, there's only two things that count in this world: results and excuses. What I like about you, I can count on you for results." So I was feeling pretty good, 22 years old, and I'm the results guy. Now, a couple years later, I got my first job in sales, which is also a very results-focused kind of a profession. But as I worked through my career in sales, from salesperson to sales manager to VP and now consultant, I thought a lot about John Huffman's words, and I realized focusing on the results isn't enough. Why? Because if your job is to get results, you can't focus on results. You have to focus on what it takes to get to the results, right? Now, some of you might know me from my books or my blogs or maybe my consulting work. And if you do, you know that I tend to take a process-oriented approach to this quest for sales results, but it wasn't always like that. In fact, there was one specific point in time early in my career when the connection between sales process and sales results really came together for me. I was pretty young. I was working pretty hard, trying to figure out my personal selling system, and I was working way too much, 10 to 12 hours a day sometimes, 6 to 7 days a week sometimes, and I didn't have a girlfriend. And I kind of wanted to have a girlfriend. And I remember thinking to myself, how am I going to find a girlfriend when I don't have time to go out and do the things people normally do when they find their girlfriend? And that's when I had the revelation. I thought to myself, if I don't have time, then what I need is a reliable, targeted girlfriend prospect source, right? I needed a lead source. And by extension, I needed a sales process for dating. Now, I know it sounds very silly. I admit that. But this one revelation really changed things for me, personally and professionally. Personally, I met a girlfriend, and she became my wife. And, then we got divorced, but that's another story. But on the professional side, what it made me realize is that too often we spend too much time focusing on the results. Why is that a problem? You can't manage a result. You can observe it. You can measure it. But what you can manage is what it takes to get you to that result. And that's why the sales process for dating revelation had such a big impact for me. So I want to take a few minutes and walk you through this analogy of sales and dating, because it illustrates really well why focusing on the result won't happen unless you really understand the process it takes to get there. So let's look at a simple sales process as an analogy for dating, and I'll explain what I mean. Now, the first step in a simple sales process is to identify a lead source, right? That was my big revelation. And a lead source is just a way of saying, who can I get into a conversation with and where can I find them, right? Because if you're not communicating with somebody, if you're not in a dialogue with somebody, you're not selling, you're not dating. You're all by yourself. And I don't know what you're doing all by yourself, but you're not selling and you're not dating. So we need to find a lead source. So what does this look like? In dating, for example, a lot of people start with their friends and their family. That's a very legitimate lead source. In fact, a lot of salespeople start there too, like those annoying multi-level marketing guys. They're always trying to sell something to their friends and their family. But when friends and family connections run out and you haven't reached your results, you have to try something else. You need another lead source. Maybe online dating sites or nightclubs or waiting for your latte in Starbucks and hoping to meet somebody. But you need to go somewhere or do something to get into a conversation. That's what we mean by lead sources. And once you have a lead source, you need to start that conversation. In sales, we call that prospecting. In dating, that's pretty straightforward. Let's say you're at a nightclub and you see someone attractive. You have to walk up to them and start the conversation, right? Or if you're on an online dating site, you have to send a message or do something to let that person know that you're interested, and let's start a conversation. Now, some of you might be thinking, you know, David, there's no reason to be so bold or so aggressive. Why not just put up a great profile on a dating site and wait for people to come to you? Or go to a club and, dance like a Greek god and wait for people to come to you. And you know what? That works. Obviously, that works. But we're talking about sales here, and sales is about being proactive. So if you like the idea of putting up an image and having people come to you, you probably belong at the marketing conference. But this is sales, and sales is about being proactive. And in prospecting, that means starting the conversation. Now, once the conversation starts, we enter the next phase of our sales and dating process, and we call this qualification. Now, in sales, we usually talk about qualifying the prospect, but you have to qualify yourself also, and this is particularly important in dating. So what does that look like? Let's go back to the nightclub. We see this attractive person that we're interested in talking to, and we decide to walk up and start a conversation. Unfortunately, as you're heading over, your brain freezes, your tongue becomes 3 sizes too big, and instead of saying that clever thing you thought of, you say something completely stupid. Guess what? You just disqualified yourself. On the other hand, if you find a more natural way to get into the conversation and just be present and engaged and be interested and learn about the other person and share some things about yourself, then the conversation goes on. And that's the point of qualification, earning the right to learn more about each other. It's true for sales, it's true for dating, and if you've achieved that, then you've succeeded through the step of qualification. Now, once you earn the right to get to know each other, you should spend some time doing that. And in sales, we call this needs analysis. Are the goals that we have aligned? Sounds pretty uncomfortable from a dating perspective, but what does that mean? Let's say one of you is looking for kind of a quick casual connection and the other one of you is looking for a spouse and children. You'll probably figure that out during needs analysis, right? But some people, especially people with what you might call kind of a ticking biological clock, they tend to rush this process, right? They go into their first date with a perfect partner checklist and kind of go through it like a job interview. Don't do that. Don't do that. First of all, you'll disqualify yourself. And second of all, needs analysis is important. We should do a good job understanding what the other person is looking for and help them understand what we have to offer. And that'll build momentum for the next steps in the process. Now, once we've determined that our needs are aligned, and once we know enough about each other to know that it might make sense to move things forward, we get to the next stage of the sales and dating process, which is called, in sales, the offer or the proposal, which is kind of a funny word in this analogy, but it's not that far off. Let me explain what I mean. Now, one of my favorite sentences in sales is, let's do this, right? Let's do this. It signals, hey, we've been talking for a while, and there seems to be some synergy. Let's take a concrete next step. In dating, this might be, let's be exclusive, or let's move in together, or let's get married. But you have to take some proactive next step together, and that's what we call the proposal or the offer stage. Now, a funny thing happens when you suggest something concrete as a next step. Either you get immediate agreement, which is great, or you get objections, right? No, or no answer, or some negotiation. If you're a woman and you have a boyfriend and you want to get married and have children and he kind of keeps not doing that, you know exactly what objections are all about. But if we can get past the objection phase. Then we get to the last stage of the deal, or last stage of the process, which is called closing the deal. Securing the result that we were after in the first place. And closing the deal is normally thought of as this really difficult thing. But it shouldn't be. If you did the things that lead up to it correctly, if you had a good lead source and you reached out in the right way and you qualified well and you got to know each other and what you're looking for and you suggested a next step the right way and in the right time, closing should be easy, right? It should be as easy as, okay then, or great, or when should we start? Or in the case of dating, sometimes it doesn't take any words at all, but I don't know how to demonstrate that here, so I'm going to leave that to your imaginations. But that's closing, and that's the sales process, and the dating process, and the interviewing process, and the process for raising venture capital, and a lot of other things. But what's the point? I mean, what can we learn from all of that? The point is this. Focusing on the results feels great when you get them. But if you don't and you want to improve, or if you do and you want to repeat that success consistently and predictably, you have to understand deeply what led to that result. Only when you have this deep understanding of what it takes to get to the result and the ability to execute, can you and your boss and your investors and maybe your worried parents finally say, És boldogan éltek, amíg meg nem haltak. Köszönöm szépen.